chapter 7 of 10. The animals face a harsh winter. It's now winter time in the novel, with dwindling food supplies. And that's already not looking good for the revolution, because one of the main issues that they tried to solve with this revolution was, all right, we need to take control of all food. We're the ones producing the food. Let's have unlimited food by cutting all the humans. But it turns out they're still having food issues. Napoleon's leadership becomes even more authoritarian as he employs increasingly drastic measures to keep control of the farm. To hide the food shortages, Napoleon deceives Mr. Whymper, the human solicitor, into believing that the farm is thriving. Meanwhile, the animals are forced to rebuild the windmill, which was destroyed during the storm. So we remember how important the windmill was for the animals. The windmill kind of symbolizes this hope, this future of prosperity. So that being destroyed by the storm is quite telling. It could be that their hope, their future, this idea they have of a better life isn't working out. It's not happening. And we know that storms throughout literature represent, problems, conflict, chaos, right? Napoleon continues to blame Snowball for the destruction, vilifying him as a traitor. And this is another plot point that aligns well with lots of history, where when leaders mess up, when leaders are unable to fulfill their promises, they need a scapegoat. They need to find someone or something to blame so that the anger of the people isn't directed at them, the leader. So Snowball is the one vilified, turned into a villain. Napoleon increases his control by forcing confessions from various animals, accusing them of conspiring with Snowball. During a brutal purge means slaughtering of many animals, who quote-unquote confessed, the dogs kill many animals and crush any dissent, any chance of, ironically, any chance of revolution. So any disagreement is just gotten rid of by the power of the dogs. The animals, terrified and disillusioned, remain loyal to Napoleon despite their increasing misery. Boxer in particular vows to work harder, despite witnessing the corruption and betrayal of the ideals he once believed in. The chapter concludes with the pigs rewriting history, claiming that Snowball was always in league with Mr. Jones. This revision of history strengthens Napoleon's power, because the animals are too confused and scared to question the official story. And I think what Orwell is really driving home here is the complacency and trust with which we accept history as it is. Is it that we need to really question what actually happened when we read something in a book, a history book, and they tell us about what happened during slavery, what happened during this time and that time? Should we just accept that because it's written? Or should we do further investigations? Should we think more critically and try to discern whether or not what we are being told is actual reality, right? Because we see here, the animals cannot really question what Napoleon is saying. They can't look deeper into the matter because, one, they're not intelligent enough, and two, they're too afraid to be killed. Remember that the dissent, the disagreement, the questioning is crushed, completely crushed, because the dogs can't just kill anybody who talk too much or ask too many questions. And so we see Napoleon's totalitarian reign, his fist is just tightening on the animals. The animals are losing whatever little freedom they have. They don't even have freedom of speech, freedom of thought. You either accept what I say or you die. And in the midst of all that, your quality of life isn't improving. It's actually getting worse. Dwindling food supplies, right? Animals being killed just for speaking their mind. Animals being forced to confess when they didn't do anything wrong. And then all of this hatred and negativity and chaos is actually pinned onto Snowball. Snowball has become the devil. And we can't just blame the devil for anything bad that happens. Oh, it's the devil's work. The devil did it. And when we blame the devil for everything, we don't need to take responsibility. Well, the devil did it. It's so funny that when good things happen, we want to take the credit, right? Instead of giving it to God. But when bad things happen, we don't want to take the blame. We blame the devil instead. Yeah, the devil's work, right? So Napoleon is kind of becoming the devil. Not Napoleon, Snowball, conceptually. Just this force of evil that we can pin all the destruction, all the chaos on, right? Can you imagine blaming Snowball for destroying the windmill when Snowball wasn't even around? How does that make sense? But the animals believe it, yeah? Any thoughts on chapter 7? Because I think we're going to just zoom past the quotes and so on. We won't look too deeply. So any further ideas you want to make note of before we run to chapter 8? The story is becoming more and more brutal. The animals seem to be getting stupider and stupider, yeah?
Isn't it?
Yes.
Is it possible that this fear put upon Napoleon's putting fear upon the animals, and is it that fear that makes them stupid and blind to the truth?
That's a good question. I don't think it's just the fear. I think there's a difference between knowing the truth but being afraid to speak because you're afraid to die, right? But the issue here is the animals eventually believe whatever Snowball says, whatever not Snowball, Napoleon says, whatever Squealer says. They're actually brainwashed. So it's not just that, okay, we're actually wise underneath, but we don't want to express our wisdom and our critical thought because there will be consequences. The case is they actually start to believe that history, the history that is being presented to them. So the idea of Napoleon being, of Snowball being the culprit underneath the destruction of the windmill, it's actually believed by the animal. The story notes the few animals who are able to somewhat remember the real history. I think Clover is one of them. Benjamin, of course, we know actually knows what's actually happening. But most of the animals, their brains are actually rewired by Squealer's his eloquence. So it's not that they're just so afraid that they want to, preserve themselves, but they're actually, I don't know, I can't think of a better word for, a better synonym for stupid. Gullible? You're so gullible that they're actually starting to believe whatever it is that Napoleon's without questioning it. And that is why I don't think it happens until maybe the next chapter. When Squealer actually, literally this time, rewrites the commandments, erases the commandments and just write one or two little things. The animals actually can't remember what was there before. You're like, this is how it's always been, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. This is it. It's never been different. And that's just it. The animals actually believe it. Yeah. So not just fear, proper brainwashing. And we see the starvation is still there. The executions, the 4 pigs waited trembling with the guilt written on every line of their countenances. And this is so important because even pigs are being slaughtered. Even pigs are being vilified. Once you side with Snowball, and we know that siding with Snowball here is really, it's not a real thing because there's no Snowball to side with. Snowball didn't have any grand schemes. So Napoleon is actually inventing these crimes. And the animals have to pay for these invented crimes with their lives. And I'm pretty sure you have your text handy. But when the animals confess, right? Let me see if I can look at one of the confessions. When these animals confess, they actually believe the confession. That is the strange part. They actually remember themselves committing the crimes, even though they didn't. That is how powerful the brainwashing is. It's gaslighting to an extreme where you convince someone that, hey, you were at this place at this time. You did this particular thing. And they say it so often and so forcefully and so convincingly that you start to remember yourself doing the thing that you didn't do. And so you eventually confess to a crime that you didn't commit. Not out of just fear, but out of actually thinking that you committed the crime. Right. Take a look at this. Let me see if I can find one of the instances. Oh yeah, we see more of the vilification here. An alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. Of course, this is all made up, but the animals actually believe it. Snowball has become the man, the myth, the legend, so detached from what he actually was. Right. Snowball crept into their stalls and milked them in their sleep. Of course, we know that Snowball wouldn't have been doing all of this because There is no Snowball. Snowball left the story chapters ago. But someone needs to be blamed. Otherwise, they're going to look at Napoleon. So Snowball is the one who takes the fall, right? Snowball, he has been here. I can smell him distinctly. So it's as if Snowball has become more of an enemy than Mr. Jones. He was Jones's secret agent all the time. It has been proved by documents. What documents? The animals can't verify that. They can't read. They just have to accept this madness. And they actually believe it. They actually believe. At first, it was a little difficult to see how this fitted in with his being on Jones's side. Even Boxer, who seldom asked questions, was puzzled. He lay down, tucked his forehoofs beneath him, shut his eyes, and with a hard effort, managed to formulate his thoughts. I do not believe that, he said. Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed. So what we're doing here is we're seeing the brainwashing in action. So Boxer can't believe that Snowball was the enemy all along. Did we not give him animal hero first class? That was our mistake, comrade. For we know now, it was all written down in the secret documents that we have found, that in reality, he was trying to lure us to our doom. But he was wounded. So we're seeing Boxer try to tackle the lies. We're seeing him try to mentally fight against it. But we're going to see how it ends up. We all saw him running with blood. That was part of the arrangement, cried Squealer. Jones's shot only grazed him. I could show you this in his own writing if you were able to read it. The plot was for Snowball, at the critical moment, to give the signal for flight and leave the field to the enemy. And he very nearly succeeded, I will even say, comrades. He would have succeeded if it had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. We, the readers, know that Napoleon kind of took a backseat in this battle. He wasn't any hero, but in this rewritten version of history, he is the hero. Do you not remember how just at the moment when Jones and his men had got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, that it was just at that moment, when panic was spreading and all seemed lost, that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward and with a cry of death to humanity, and sank his teeth into Jones's leg? Surely you remember that, comrades, exclaimed Squealer, frisking from side to side. No! When Squealer described the scene so graphically, it seemed to the animals that they did remember it. This is what I'm talking about. The memories are actually being etched into the animals' brains. These false memories. At any rate, they remembered that at the critical moment of the Battle of the Cowshed, Snowball had turned to flee. But Boxer was still a little uneasy. So some of the animals are taking a little bit longer to brainwash than others. And we're seeing that Boxer is kind of resisting the brainwashing. He's saying, no. Something doesn't add up. Something is weird about this story. I do not believe that Snowball was a traitor at the beginning, he said finally. What he has done since is different. So he is half brainwashed. What he has done since, because Snowball hasn't done anything since. So he's half brainwashed, but he's not brainwashed yet to the point where he's believing that Snowball is the devil. But I believe that at the Battle of the Cowshed, he was a good comrade. Our leader, Comrade Napoleon, announced Squealer, speaking very slowly and firmly. See, he's using more rhetorical techniques, so the slow, firm speech, has stated categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones' agent from the very beginning. Yes, and from long before the rebellion was even thought of. Imagine that. Ah, that is different, said Boxer. If Comrade Napoleon says it must be right. This is where Boxer is completely brainwashed. Because Napoleon says it so well. There we go. Napoleon only speaks truth. And we're getting an insight into Boxer's the brainwashing, the resistance at first, until he slowly accepts it and eventually he can't remember anything else except what Napoleon said. And this would be the thought process of the other animals as well. Yeah? And as we continue, we see more of the brainwashing process. Clover and Boxer seem to take a little bit longer to brainwash than everybody else. I think at the very end, the only animal that completely actually retains the truth in their minds might be Benjamin. Everybody else, to some degree, how as their minds tampered with, and so it's really showing us the power of language. Squealer says it in such a way that it sounds so real, and then it's not just the manipulation in that sense, but also the loyalty given to to Napoleon, to the point where even when Napoleon says something illogical, Boxer accepts it as gospel because Napoleon said so. Yeah. We continue to see this theme. Totalitarianism and terror, with the executions and stuff, corruption of power. We see that Napoleon no longer cares about the farm and its well-being. It's all about maintaining power at this point. And manipulation of history is a big theme here, especially with how the Snowball narrative is rewritten and spun in such a way where Snowball was always the villain, even before the revolution started. That is such a lie. Before the revolution started, why would Snowball be a villain, right? Snowball wasn't doing anything. He was just another animal. But he's this manufactured devil so that all of the hate can be cast on him. All of the blame can be cast on him. Right? Yeah. Clover has some interesting character development in this chapter. Clover's growing doubts about the leadership, especially after the executions, highlight her internal conflict. Although she recognizes that the farm's current state is not what she envisioned, she cannot bring herself to rebel against Napoleon, still fearing the return of Mr. Jones. So she believes that if Napoleon is ousted, if he is removed from power, that's somehow going to cause Mr. Jones to return. This is still more brainwashing. Her inability to articulate her thoughts reflects the broader powerlessness of the uneducated humans who are unable to challenge the authority of the pigs, right? So even when you have some interesting ideas, even when you have some doubts about the leadership, you cannot express yourself because you're not educated enough. And so we see where, in one sense, when you look at the pigs, education is weaponized and used as a tool to brainwash and to maintain power, and to centralize power. But in the case of Clover, the lack of education acts as a handicap because it disallows her from actually expressing what she's thinking. She can't really form her thoughts into words. She has all of these doubts, but they're so cloudy in her mind, and she doesn't have the vocabulary. She doesn't have the means to say, hey, something is wrong here. And what eventually happens is her doubts are just replaced by the brainwashing, by the new history, right? If the animals are more educated, they would be able to in a very intelligent way express their doubts, express their issues, their concerns, and they will be able to validate each other's thoughts. Clover says something and then the other animals are like, yeah, isn't that right? But nobody is capable of expressing themselves. There is the fear, but there's also the lack of education, and there's also the nifty brainwashing from Squealer. Yeah. The ironies continue of how things are getting worse instead of better, even though they're freed from the humans. We have the executions here foreshadowing that brutality is going to be the main way in which Napoleon rules, right? And what's very, very interesting for me here is the symbolism. The rebuilding of the windmill symbolizes the animals' repeated attempts to create a better future, despite the fact that their efforts are constantly undermined by the pigs' corruption. So by trying again on the windmill, it means they're still working within Napoleon's vision. Like, yes, this is the way forward. Let's try again. They're still buying into this dream. And for the readers, it's quite clear that this dream will never be accomplished. And again, the imagery of the windmill it's this round and round motion. It's going nowhere fast, right? A very interesting physical object here that is so fitting in terms of the cyclical nature of the poverty and how things just go back to square one, right? Because a windmill, wherever the windmill starts, that's where it stops. It doesn't actually move. It just spins. Just as though these animals aren't really progressing, regardless of how hard they find themselves working.